guys, welcome back to Camp in a Box. Today we're going to make our very own Roman mosaic. For this activity you're going to need a paintbrush and glue, or just use your fingers, as well as a pair of scissors and our template, and a whole lot of colored squares. These will come in your box and you should have enough material to make a couple mosaics. I'm using the sun template for this demonstration, so I went ahead and wrote down what colors I wanted where, and then started sorting all of my squares so I had the colors that I needed. In your kit you should get both larger and smaller squares. If you want to make this craft a little bit more challenging, try cutting up your larger squares into small squares and challenge yourself to only use the tiny squares for your mosaic. Not only will you get a little bit more detail and definition in your picture, but it'll take a little bit longer and you have more freedom with the shapes you can create. Once you have enough squares, go ahead and grab your glue and start gluing certain sections of your template and lay down your squares. Remember, only go section by section so you don't glue the entire page, and then by the time you're ready to stick your squares to it, the glue has dried. I started with the rays of my sun and primarily used orange. When you run into a shape that is a little bit odd or really isn't a square, now you have to use your little squares in order to fill in the blank space. It's okay if your squares go off your page just a little bit because we'll trim them up later. So for example, here, the top part of my shape is pretty narrow, so I started with one little square and then used a mixture of little squares and big squares to fill in the blank spot. It's time to tackle the circle at the center of our template. I started with one big square in the middle and then worked my way around it with smaller and larger squares. But really, I should have started with a small square and only used small squares for this part of the project, and you'll see why. See how the small squares are already starting to kind of look weird? That's because I started with the large square instead of with a smaller square. If I had started with the smaller square, I would have been able to pack my small squares together much more neatly, so I would have more of a circle shape instead of the weird kind of blob I have going on right now. Once you're done with that center circle, you can keep working on the other side of your template. Once you're done putting down the main pieces on your template, you might notice that there are a couple of spaces that are still pretty empty, but they won't fit a square. Cut your squares into triangles and then fill in those blank spaces as best as you can. If you have large sections that are too thin even for triangles, go ahead and put down some glue and add on some pieces that you know will hang over the edge of your mosaic. Again, we can just trim these off later. Once you're happy with the coverage on your template, set it aside to dry. If you notice that the paper is starting to curl up, put it underneath something heavy, like a book or a stack of plates. I've given my mosaic time to dry. It's time to flip it over and start cutting off those little extra pieces that are hanging off. This is most easy to see on the back side of the paper, so just go nice and slow and trim off all those little overhangs. Once you're done trimming, you're all done with this craft. Thanks so much for making this mosaic with me today, guys. I hope you had fun, and I'll see you on the next one.